video.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes, Akshay.
Shall we start, ma'am?
Yes, we can start.
Good afternoon, everyone. Myself, Akshay Kumar, welcomes you for the national webinar on Navadasha Samvada. On this auspicious day, we have guest speaker Dr. Manjula Karlwad. Now, I call upon Diksha, final year student, for guest introduction. Diksha.
Yeah, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here to introduce today's speaker as well as our beloved lecturer, Dr. Manjula Karalwad, ma'am. I welcome you, ma'am. Ma'am is presently working as Assistant Professor in Department of Kaya Chikitsa, AMV Hubli. Ma'am was born on 19th May 1985. Ma'am has completed her UG from BVVS Ayurveda Medical College and Hospital, Bagalkot, and post-graduation in Kai Chikitsa from Ayurved Mahavidyalaya, Hubli. And ma'am has also completed e-certificate course in Health Research Fundamentals from National Institute of Epidemiology. As well as she has completed her DPharm course from TAAE Society, MMJG College of Pharmacy, Haveri. Ma'am has secured Best Presenter Award for presenting clinical study of Gudadi Modaka in management of Udvaga Amlapitta 2011 at National Institute of Ayurveda, Jaipur. She has also presented on recent advances in management of Vata Rakta at state level seminar on recent advances in diagnosis and management of Vata Rakta, peripheral vascular disease 2011 at Udupi. Another scientific paper was presented by ma'am at World Conference on Ayu 2012, Pune on topic A Study of Tu Basti Yoga in Redressy. She has also presented scientific paper on anesthesia and Ayurveda at 3rd International and 15th National Conference of AAIM 2012, Belgium, and presented another scientific paper on review on Sandigata Vata at state level seminar on differential and diagnosis Dhatu Kshayaja Vatavyadi 2012 at UP. Ma'am has also presented poster on comparative study of Sthanika Abhyanga and spinal bath in Katishula at International Conference on Yoga and Naturopathy 2012, Belgium, Bangalore. Ma'am has published 2 articles in International Journal on topic Yogasana and Pranayama practice promotes physiological functions in male adolescents. Ma'am has attended more than 20 seminars and workshops. Ma'am has conducted free health checkup camps and at various places. Ma'am is keenly interested in participating in social awareness programs and educating the society. I wholeheartedly welcome you, ma'am. We are eagerly waiting to listen to your words. Thank you.
Thank you, Diksha. Now the session is yours, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Diksha. Rashri, Dr. Rashri is there. Dr. Rashri, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. She is presenting, ma'am.
Yes. Okay. On the 4th day of Navadasha Samvada, it's a great privilege to present my topic on the parathyroid disorders, its management, a brief general introduction to the gland. And I wholeheartedly thank all the organizing committee for having given me an opportunity to present a topic in one of the day. Okay. I stand by with the topic without much debating. Before going to the parathyroid disorders, I would like to just say a few words that it belongs to an endocrine disorder. Fine. Endocrinology is a vast topic. It's like an ocean. In endocrinology, we have mainly endocrine glands, 6 types of endocrine glands, where these secretions, the secretions of these glands are studied in detail. They are hyperactivity, hypoactivity, resistance, like pancreatic islets, thyroid gland, adrenaline gland, pituitary gland, which secretes almost 8 hormones, then parathyroid gland, and hypothalamus. Today, I am going to deal only with the disorders of the parathyroid gland. Okay, next slide, please. We cannot, when we are dealing with any of the gland or the part, we cannot directly jump into its functions without knowing the basics. So because when your basics are strong, you'll be able to understand the exact functioning. So coming to the anatomical location, the parathyroid gland is a small gland, small endocrine gland. Usually the parathyroid gland is combinedly studied with the thyroid, but combining the thyroid and the parathyroid gland functioning will be a vast topic, so it is been splitted. The thyroid will be dealt in the further lectures. Okay, so it is located in the anterior part of the neck, and mainly the function of this gland is, as everyone knows, to secrete the parathyroid hormone. Okay, and to coming to the exact location, it is located on the posterior and the medial aspect of each lobe of the thyroid gland. You have a thyroid gland. To when come with respect to anatomical situation to the thyroid gland, it is posterior and medial aspect. Okay, and there are 4 number of parathyroid glands, so you can say it as 2 pairs. Okay, then the mainly superior parathyroid and the inferior parathyroid gland. So coming to the Utpatti, that is embryological origin of the superior parathyroid and inferior parathyroid. Superior parathyroid is from the 4th pharyngeal pouch, okay, and it is situated inferior to the cricoid cartilage. And inferior parathyroid, the origin is from the 3rd pharyngeal pouch, and it is located inferior poles of the thyroid gland. In about 1 to 5% of the people, they are found deep into the mediastinum, in the superior mediastinum. Superior mediastinum, they are usually located in around 5% of the people. Okay, the next slide, that is, you can have a picture of the 4 parathyroid glands, which are situated just adjacent to the thyroid gland. You can see the thyroid gland, the green color, what is that? That is a thyroid gland, and the yellow color, that is the superior and inferior parathyroid glands on right and left, and they are supplied with the inferior thyroid artery. Coming to the next slide, coming to the histology. Okay, the histology goes like that. It is having 2 types of cells, that is the chief cells and the oxophilic cells. Okay, here the functioning of the chief cells is of prime importance in studying the parathyroid gland, because they play an important role in secreting the parathyroid hormone. Okay, and they contain prominent Golgi apparatus and the endoplasmic reticulum. Hope you all are aware of the what is that parts of the cell. So I did not explain what is Golgi apparatus and endoplasmic reticulum. Okay, they mainly prominently they contain these 2 abundantly and allow the synthesis and secretions. This is very important. Both it is important in the synthesis and the secretion of the parathyroid hormone. The chief cells are very small when compared to the oxophilic cells. Okay, And oxophilic cells are, again, comparative to chief cells, they are bit larger and less abundant. Then because the functioning is less, so according to the Darwin's theory, which part is used frequently are abundant, which is not used, it is less in number. So they are, when compared to the chief cells, they are very less. Okay, and still the research are being on to know the exact functions of this oxophilic cells. Okay, and it is being noted according to the anatomist that these cells, oxophilic cells, goes on increasing as your age progresses, and they are mainly prominent and more in number during the puberty. Okay, and here you can also, according to pathologists, when they have studied, the study was taken now, they tell that even the fat cells are abundantly seen in the within the parathyroid gland. Adipose cells are mainly seen in the parathyroid gland when you take a cross section and see it. Okay, next. So here the figure, you can see the oxophilic cells and the what is that, chief cells of the parathyroid gland. This is a slide which shows you the cells and the size as well. Next slide. Now coming to the synthesis, how the parathyroid hormone synthesis. Okay, synthesis and secretions, these two are very separately. Here we'll first deal with the synthesis. Okay, according to the endocrinology, all the hormones are mainly of 4 types, and the parathyroid hormone is a protein. Okay, it is a protein, so it is a long chain, polymer chain of amino acids. Okay, the synthesis of parathyroid hormone begins in the, very important here, it begins in the rough endoplasmic reticulum. It is starting from the rough endoplasmic reticulum, wherein it is secreted as pre and pro parathyroid hormone. Here it is, when it is secreted, it is both pre and pro parathyroid hormone. Then this is a 115, as you can see in the slide. Okay, that is a long chain of amino acid. Okay, then what happens when it is cleaved through the endoplasmic reticulum? When it comes across from the rough endoplasmic reticulum to the lumen of the endoplasmic reticulum, it is emerging as a pro-parathyroid hormone. Okay, then after it is cleaved or transferred into the Golgi apparatus, the pro sequence is cleaved and the production of the mature parathyroid hormone is available, and it is stored and it is in the secretory granules, and whenever and as required, it is secreted from the secretory granules. Okay, this is a pathway from the rough endoplasmic reticulum to the lumen of the endoplasmic reticulum to the Golgi apparatus. If there is any deformity in this pathway, the deformities takes place. So the identification is very important. So the pathway is very important to understand. Next slide, that is coming to the actions. Okay, hormone actions. So mainly it is having 3 actions, wherein it increases the bone reabsorption, that is absorption in the bloodstream or in the tissue or the cell, and increased reabsorption in the kidney and in the synthesis of vitamin D. So these are the 3 functions of the parathyroid hormone. Okay, all of which act in increasing the calcium levels in the body. All these 3, definitely the functioning or the action, definitely help in the, what is that, help in the, sorry, okay, help in the increasing the calcium levels in the body. Fine. Okay, here what happens in the increased bone reabsorption, what happens, the cytokine secretions from the osteoblasts osteoblast, cytokine secretion from the osteoblast that act on the osteoclast cells increase the activity. Okay, these osteoclast cells are responsible for the breakdown of the bone. Thus, increased activity of this will increase the bone breakdown. Okay, this leads to the increased calcium level in the extracellular fluid because these osteoclasts are responsible for the breakdown, and for the activation of the osteoclast, the cytokinase secretion from the osteoblast is very important. Okay. Next, coming to the increased reabsorption from the kidney. Here at the level of the Henle's loop and the distal tubules, which are present in the nephron, what happens? They are absorbed. Lot of amount of calcium is absorbed at the loop, Henle's loop and the distal tubules. Why it is absorbed? Because when it is absorbed, it is streamed into the bloodstream. Additionally, this parathyroid hormone increases the rate of phosphate excretion in the form of urine. So when phosphate is excreted and calcium is absorbed, reabsorbed, why this happens is to prevent the formation of the calcium phosphate kidney stones. I hope you are aware of the kidney types of the kidney stones, oxalate cells and phosphate, calcium phosphate and phosphate calcium separately. So here calcium phosphate kidney stones, to prevent this, so increased reabsorption at the level of the kidney for the absorption of calcium is very important. Okay, then coming to the vitamin D synthesis, although parathyroid hormone does not actively increase the absorption of the calcium in the gut, it is not going to increase the absorption of the calcium in the gut, that is GIT, but it stimulates the formation of the vitamin D. You all are aware, in presence of vitamin D3 only, the calcium is, absorption of calcium is better achieved. Okay, so subsequently absorption of the calcium from the gut. So it is going to, enhance, stimulate the formation of the vitamin D. These are the three functions of the parathyroid hormone. Next slide, that is how it is regulated. The regulation of the parathyroid hormone, it is very important. Mainly, it is regulated and controlled by a negative feedback loop. Okay, there are different theories postulated on how the hormones are, functioning in the body. So, parathyroid hormone is mainly controlled and regulation is done through the negative feedback loop. Here, mainly for this functioning, the chief cells, the cells of the parathyroid gland, the chief cells have a unique G protein calcium receptor. Okay, there is a receptor called as G protein calcium receptor. These are playing an important role in the hormone regulation. Okay, how is that? When calcium levels in the blood are increased, when the calcium levels in the blood are increased, what happens is that the parathyroid hormone production is stopped. It is ceased. When the calcium levels are increased, the parathyroid hormone production is stopped. And next, to stop the further serum calcium level increased, leading to hypercalcemia. So here, first of all, there is an increased level of calcium in the blood, and this PTH production must be stopped in further for the elevation, so that it should not continually, serum calcium levels in the blood should not be increased. To stop that, so what happens? To prevent the hypercalcemia, this calcium binds to the G protein, that is G protein calcium receptor, and subsequently forms the production of the phosphoinositide, which in turn prevents the further increase of the calcium levels, and it deposits the calcium back into the bone. It will not allow the calcium to freely float in the serum, but it will deposit the calcium back to the bones. Okay, when calcium is reduced, the reverse occurs in the what is that, blood. So when it is increased, this happens. That is, the G protein has to get activated and it has to stop the increase of serum calcium in the blood and for the deposition of the calcium back to the bones. But when it is decreased, what happens? The reverse of this, opposite of this happens. An important note here, elevated phosphate always lowers the free calcium in the blood and inhibits the formation of the vitamin D. As already told in the functioning, what happens when there is increased phosphate levels, what happens? It binds with the free calcium and forms the calcium phosphate crystals. So it inhibits the formation of vitamin D and as well as the, what is that, calcium in the, functioning of the calcium in the blood. Okay. Next slide. That is coming to the disorders. Disorders mainly, next slide, Rashi. Okay, here mainly what happens, you can study the previous slide. You have come one slide more. Okay, here it can be, any gland can be studied in 3 headings. That is excess hormone secretion, then hormone deficiency, that is less hormone secretion, and next one is hormone resistance. It can be any kind of gland can be studied mainly in these 3 headings. And to understand it is an excess or it is a deficiency or it is a resistance, the approach to the patient, next slide, approach to the patient is very important. How you approach the patient. So history taking plays a very important role, wherein you have to ask the detailed signs and symptoms, the, how it onset, and the physical examination. You'll have to not lose a single sign here. Okay, and hormone assay as usual is a supportive and a major tool in the approach to the patient and to treat the anomaly actively. So you can have a full hormone assay and proactivation test, suppression test, and you can collect the samples like a plasma or urine or serum, and the screening and assessment goes on accordingly. It is an excessive decrease of resistance. Coming to the next slide, directly coming to the coming to hypoparathyroidism. Okay, hypoparathyroidism is a disorder or a disease in which there is a decreased function of the parathyroid gland. Okay, leading to the decreased secretions or levels of the parathyroid hormone. What are the causes? What are the nidanas or the causes that leads to hypoparathyroidism? First one is thyroidectomy, that is removal of parathyroid glands along with the thyroid glands. They can spare, but usually when thyroidectomy is done, along with that, even the parathyroid glands are also removed. Then one more cause is an autoimmune disorder. So autoimmune disorder, then hemochromatosis, then it may be chromosomal linked by birth, genetic defect, then magnesium deficiency, and what is that, idiopathic, and it may be hereditary also. Coming to the next slide for the figure 3, which tells you about the signs and symptoms of hypoparathyroidism. So there are a number of presentations, all psychological, and which are related to your sense organs, which are related to your extremities, muscles, generalized symptoms, then related to your respiratory system, related to your skin. Okay, these are the and related to your reproductive system. Coming to the next slide, signs and symptoms. Here, first coming to the general signs and symptoms and additional symptoms in turn, because most of them are present only unisex. Okay, coming to the general signs and symptoms, tingling sensation, that is neurological symptoms, that is tinglings of the lips, fingers, toes. Along with that, you have a muscle cramps, pain in the face, that facial muscles, you have pain or in all the, while mastication, while deglutination, you have some sort of pain in the muscles of the face. and you have pain in the legs, feet, then abdominal cramps, you have dry and brittle breaking of hairs is one of the important feature here, and brittle nails. The nails are very brittle, they break very easily, and the skin is very dry and it is scaly, and cataracts are more common. And in children particularly, you can see that the tooth enamel is weakened or it is eroded, and sometimes it is lost too. So when the tooth enamel is lost, additional symptoms you have. There is delayed or absent tooth formation. So because of this weakened, first it is weakened, then eroded, and it is completely lost. When it is lost, so there is no formation of the tooth. This is particularly seen in children. So if you have the parent comes up with a complaint that there are no tooth eruptions or delayed in the tooth eruptions, or the teeth are deformed and somewhat not abnormal tooth, you have to think about the parathyroid gland dysfunction. And muscle cramps, spasms, here tetanic convulsions. The tetanic convulsions may be clonic, tonic, or both clonic and tonic. Then they may end up with severe seizures. And if that happens, the person will have some sort of laryngeal spasm, and there is difficulty in breathing, and the person may end up in admitting into the ICU because of this tetanic convulsions. Okay, it can be an emergency too. And coming to the additional symptoms, in adolescents or in female population, you can always see painful menstruation, and along with that, you have cold, clampy, and cramps or spasms of the foot and hand, along with the painful menstruation. And the decreased consciousness, always the person or the affected person is always drowsy, is not aware of what is happening in and around him. Okay, and delayed formation of the tooth, I have already explained in the weakening tooth anatomy. Coming to the next slide, that is diagnosis and differential diagnosis, which is very important. Okay, yeah, you think that you have come to a proper diagnosis without differential diagnosis, without eliminating them and coming to a proper diagnosis is very important. For diagnosis, what are required? Required tools that are helpful in coming to a proper diagnosis is measurement of the calcium levels, serum calcium levels, then serum albumin, and parathyroid hormone in the blood, and ECG. Why ECG is required is usually what happens in hypoparathyroidism is QT wave is always elongated because of the arrhythmias that is happening in the cardiac. Okay. Coming to the differential diagnosis, you have to rule out vitamin D deficiency. You can have to rule out pseudo hypoparathyroidism. We'll be coming to this pseudo hypothyroidism. What are the features of that? So we'll have to differentiate from that, and you'll have to differentiate from the malabsorption syndrome, then kidney disease. Usually, the chronic kidney diseases become a contributing secondary factor for the malfunctioning of the parathyroid hormone or the gland. Then medications, long-term use of steroids, diuretics, anti-epileptic drugs also have an impact or alteration in the functioning of the parathyroid gland or the secretion of the parathyroid hormone. Coming to the line of treatment in the next slide. So here, immediate treatment is intravenous calcium is the only thing which has to be, monitored. And it has to be monitored judicially according to the age, weight, okay, and the condition, severity, and the level of the. So only I have not described it because it differs from body weight, age, and the serum calcium levels. Okay, and coming to the long-term treatment, you can go with calcium supplements, oral calcium supplements, and vitamin D3 also. In Ayurveda, you can give calcium-rich supplements like Ashtishrankala, Yashti, Shatavari, okay, Pravada Panchamrita, Pravada Pishti, Shankabhasma, which are all rich in, you can go with oral supplements. But immediate treatment, intravenous, which is not possible through Ayurveda. Okay, coming to the next slide, that is, what are the possible complications that may emerge? As I've already told, in tetanic convulsions or the muscle spasms that may end up. So when the person have that tetanic convulsions, the airway may be blocked and the person may end up with respiratory distress and may end up in admitting into himself in the ICU. Along with this, the growth is retarded, short stature of the person, and malformed teeth is on this. It is a permanent deformity. Okay, then slow mental development, the cognition capacity because of the mental retardation, and the somatic development is fast and the mental development is slow, so you may end up with cognitive deformities also, slow mental development because of this. Then how treatment has to be done? Over treatment with vitamin D and calcium can lead to hypercalcemia. So continuously, when they are diagnosed with continuously giving vitamin D supplements and continuously giving vitamin calcium tablets continuously without monitoring, it is very dangerous. And you are suffering from hypo, that may end into hyper. Okay, hypercalcemia, which comes in hyperparathyroidism. Okay, next slide. That is pseudo hypoparathyroidism. Okay, coming to the pseudo hypothyroidism, it is a condition caused by resistance to the parathyroid hormone. So here the resistance, I have already told, while dealing with any gland or secretions of the gland, you'll have to deal it in 3 ways. That is hyposecretions and resistance. So pseudo hypothyroidism is the best example wherein you have a resistance to the parathyroid hormone. Here what happens, the patients have a low serum calcium. The serum calciums are very low and high phosphates. As I have told you in the pathway itself, regulation, whenever the phosphate levels are high, the serum calcium levels are very less because the phosphate binds into the calcium and forms the calcium phosphate crystals. But here addition to low serum calcium and high phosphate, addition to this, the parathyroid hormones are appropriately high. Even the parathyroid hormones are high. It is trying to regulate this high phosphate levels, and so it is trying to regulate, but it is not. So the levels are very high. So the person will end up with pseudo hypoparathyroidism. There are types, that is type 1A, type 1B, and type 2. Okay, next. What are the presentations? Next slide. That is presentations of the pseudo hypoparathyroidism. The features are hypocalcemia. So we'll deal with hypocalcemia. This is hypocalcemia is one of the presentations in pseudo hypoparathyroidism, and it is a separate disease entity also. And the person may end up with carpopedal spasm, tetanic convulsions, muscle cramps, and seizures. Seizures are tetanic convulsions itself because they may be clonic or tonic, so they have mentioned seizures. Okay, in type 1A pseudo hypoparathyroidism clinically manifest by blunting of 4th and 5th metacarpals. So 4th and 5th metacarpals are blunt. In the 4th, they are blunt. In this pattern, they become vakrata, anguli vakrata, what we call it as, it becomes like that. As I have already told, there is a growth retardation. The person will be very stout. Okay, and stout and obese always go hand in hand, and obesity. Then developmental delay occurs. Okay, at the young age, if it's there. So if in children's, to deal with the diseases of the children's, you have 4 Ds. What are those 4 Ds? They are developmental delays, deficiencies, defect at birth, and diseases. So defect at birth can be controlled only through Garbha Samskara, etc. Rest of the other 3, that is disease, deficiency, and developmental delay, can be definitely controlled by timely identification of the problem and rectifying it with Ahara, Vihara, and Aushadhi. Okay. Otherwise, they are going to end up with the permanent deformities in the body, which are irreversible. Okay. Then these are the presentation. How to find this? What are the biochemical findings you are going to see? So you are going to see hypocalcemia, then hyperphosphatemia, then elevated parathyroid hormones. These are the features which are seen in pseudo-hypoparathyroidism. Okay, next slide. Coming to hypocalcemia. Okay, hypocalcemia, that is hypocalcemia, that is a muscle spasm. Okay, muscle spasm, if it is severe, may end up with tetanic spasm or tetanic convulsion, then carpopedial spasm or deformity, then facial grimacing, that is because of the facial pain, then laryngeal spasm, convulsions, respiratory attack. This goes as a continuous chain, and increased intracranial pressure, then irritability, depression, psychosis, arrhythmias. So in the ECG, you can see the QT interval is increased. Okay, then intestinal cramps. And you'll have to never forget the clinical examination here. Then what are the clinical examination signs you'll have to see is when you take a sphygmomanometer cuff and tie it to your right or upper arm, any upper arm you tie, and you'll have to blow the sphygmomanometer around 20 mm of Hg. What happens? For around 3 minutes, you have some sort of carpal spasm produced in your upper arm. Okay, this is one of the prominent signs. Then Chaward sign here, contraction of the facial muscles when you irritate the facial nerve. Where you'll have to irritate the facial nerve, that is in front of the lobe of the ear. You'll have to irritate that, so you have a contraction of the facial muscles. Then Ebb signs, here when you stimulate the muscles with galvanic stimulations with the knee hammer, what happens? Muscles will show you some sort of increased excitability. Okay, that happens here. Okay, in hypocalcemia. Next slide, that is coming to the treatment. Treatment of directly coming to the treatment here is a replacement with the vitamin D and calciterdol. Okay, then high oral calcium intakes, which is very temporary. You cannot continue that high oral calcium intake. Then thiazerides, that is diuretics, can be given. And Ayurvedic treatment, you can use Godanti, Pravala Panchamrita, Asti Shankala, fortified or double strength. Those can be monitored for particular period of time. And then the hormone assay or the markers are repeated. So depending upon their improvement, you will have to decrease or stop the intake. Coming to the next slide, that is figure 4, wherein it shows you about the hyperparathyroidism. Okay, these are the symptoms, signs and symptoms of hyperparathyroidism, which will deal in the coming slides. Okay, next slide, that is what is exactly coming to hyperparathyroidism. It is an overactivity of the parathyroid gland resulting in excess production of the parathyroid hormone. Okay, then there is a classification for hyperparathyroidism: primary, secondary, and tertiary. Depending upon the presentation, it is being called as primary, secondary, tertiary. Why it is called as primary hyperparathyroidism is here directly what happens, hyperfunctioning of the parathyroid gland. The thyroid gland itself, parathyroid gland is itself functioning hyper. There is oversecretion. Why there is oversecretion? What is the cause? It is because of adenoma, hyperplasia, or neoplasm, that is carcinoma of the parathyroid gland. Because of the abnormal cells which are present in the parathyroid gland, they are functioning abnormally high. That leads to primary hyperparathyroidism. So what happens in secondary hyperparathyroidism? Here, what happens is, here, reaction of the parathyroid gland to the hypocalcemia. The parathyroid reacts to the hypocalcemic causes by something other than parathyroid pathology. There is no any parathyroid cell pathology like benign or malignant cells, but it is other than that pathology, it is responding to the hypocalcemic conditions. Example, in chronic kidney failure, as I've already told, kidney diseases have to be always monitored for thyroid and parathyroid glands functioning because they are interrelated, as there is a reabsorption at the level of the Henle's loop and distal tubules I have already said in the functioning. Because here the disease of the kidney becomes the cause for the functioning, abnormal functioning, hyper functioning of the parathyroid gland. Coming to the tertiary, here chronic kidney diseases. Tertiary hyperparathyroidism is a state of excessive secretion of parathyroid hormone after a long period of secondary hyperparathyroidism as resulting in hypercalcemia. So what happens? In long term, the secondary cause become the tertiary cause. Okay. Next slide. What are the nidana or the etiological factors for primary hyperparathyroidism? What is it? Benign parathyroid adenoma, then neoplasm, that is multiple endocrine, malignant cells, neoplasia. Then secondary hyperthyroidism due to excessive secretion of parathyroid hormone by parathyroid gland in response to hypocalcemia. Okay, and usually due to chronic renal failure, as already told. Then tertiary, the cause is itself again long-lasting disorders of the calcium feedback control, as it is a negative feedback. So there is a disorder in the calcium. I have already told the pathway has to be understood very carefully. So because of that feedback control is lost, that in the long-lasting disorders, so it is not fed with a proper coding. So it leads to tertiary hyperparathyroidism. Coming to the symptoms and the signs, the patient always may end up with asymptomatic and healthy patient. Accidentally, it is found out that the patient is suffering from hyperparathyroidism. Okay, how it is coincidentally find out? By hypercalcemia. If hypercalcemia is an independent disease, and if that exists also, you can come to know that the patient is hyperparathyroidism. The symptomatic patient presents with the symptoms like mainly the neurological symptoms, like tingling sensation of the extremities, some sort of neuralgic burning sensation. Okay, those. Then weakness and fatigue, generalized weakness and fatigue. You have depression, you have aches and pains all over the body, and there is decreased appetite, feeling of nausea and vomiting, constipation, you have polyuria, you have cognitive impairment, you have kidney stones, you have osteoporosis, and due to the osteoporosis you may end up with brittle bones and fractures also. Okay, next. Here we have a rhyme to remember the hyperparathyroidism symptoms of hyperparathyroidism. What is the rhyme here is moans, groans, stones, moans and overtones. Overtones are restricted to psychiatric overtones. What are these moans? Moans are the person is moaning. Why he is moaning? Because he's not feeling well. He is having a lot of pains in the body. Whenever you have a lot of pains, you have make some sort of sounds, right? That is called as moaning. Okay, moans. Then groans. Groans is mainly related to gurgling type of some sort of abnormal things that are related to GI system. That may be abdominal cramps, gastroesophageal reflex, that is nausea, vomiting, constipation, flatus of the abdomen, etc. Stones you are all aware of, as kidney is having a direct relation in that. So you have calcium phosphate crystals forms in the kidney and end up with the renal colic. Okay. Urethral colic, wherever the stone is situated, and regarding to that only you will have symptoms, that is polyuria or painful micturition, or there is a change in color of the urine depending upon the situation of the stone, etc. Then bones, bone pain. Along with the bone pain, I have already told you, have a severe intense type of bone pains, and due to that you may end up with fractures also because of the eroding of the bones. And psychiatric overtones, here always the person is lethargic, some depression types of depression. The person is always depressed, not interested in doing any day-to-day activities, and he has memory-related problems. He is not able to remember the day-to-day things, and whatever he does or he reads, he forgets eventually. Okay. Next, coming to the laboratory tests. Okay, laboratory test here, serum calcium, so you'll have to monitor serum phosphorus, and you'll have to monitor alkaline phosphates. Okay, here what happens to the serum calcium in case of primary and tertiary classification? What happens in primary and tertiary hyperparathyroidism? Increased PTH consequently leads to increased serum calcium. Okay, there is increased serum calcium, but in secondary, what happens? Effectiveness of PTH is reduced. And serum phosphorus in primary hyperparathyroidism abnormally low. The levels of phosphorus are low, but in secondary hyperparathyroidism and serum phosphorus levels are generally elevated. They are increased. Now coming to the alkaline phosphates, the levels are not elevated in all types of hyper. They are not elevated in any type, that is primary, secondary, and tertiary. They are not at all elevated. Okay. Next, coming to the diagnosis, how we'll have to do the diagnosis? Definitely, the parathyroid hormone immunoassay has to be done. But what happens in tertiary hyperparathyroidism is that has a high PTH and high serum calcium. Okay, in only tertiary it happens. Then how we'll have to treat and monitor? The only treatment here advisable is surgery. And if the patient is not willing for surgery and surgery is not the choice of treatment, then you'll have to only monitor. You cannot do any much. Okay, how will you have to monitor? You'll have to regularly monitor the calcium levels. You will have to do the BMD, that is bone mineral density, has to be done regularly. That too of the forearm is very important. It has a clinical significance. Okay, then check for the kidney stones regularly. Okay, urine culture or through ultrasounds, you'll have to keep monitoring for the kidney stones. Then because of the serum calcium levels high, what happens? They can have the all rights to bond with phosphorus and form the crystals. Then how to prevent? You have to prevent. Prevention is better than cure. You'll have to prevent what by regular exercises, adequate vitamin D supplements, and so that will help in the absorption of the calcium. Always stay hydrated so that lot of improperly metabolites are flushed, and no smoking, because smoking definitely directly has an link in reducing the calcium deposition. Okay. Next slide, that is hypercalcemia, is one of the first symptom in hyperparathyroidism, and it is as a different entity. So what do you have in hypercalcemia? Fatigue, depression, mental. You may have a confusion that all the symptoms are same in all the things, but that has to be substantial. That's what I told. Without your diagnosis is not very clear without differential diagnosis. So when differential diagnosis, all this list comes, but keeping the reports or the immunoassay, you have to diagnose and you'll have to see. Okay, mental confusion, anorexia, nausea, vomiting, constipation. Okay, you have all this. Then how to treat this? You have to restrict the dietary calcium. It has to be reduced drastically, and rehydration is very much required, and forced diuresis, forced. Okay, flushing therapy is definitely indicated, and calcitonin is advised, and phosphate therapy is also advised, so that the free calcium is binding to that, and forced diuresis helps in flushing out those binded particles, that is binded calcium phosphate crystals. Next slide, that is parathyroid dependent hypercalcemia. Okay, this is a condition. Here hypercalcemia is definitely dependent on parathyroid. It is a parathyroid dependent. So what happens? It is always associated with hypercalcemia, abnormal parathyroid gland, and three distinct settings. What is that? First one is primary hyperthyroidism and family hypercalcemia and lithium-induced hypercalcemia. These are the three distinct settings we'll have to see in parathyroid-dependent hypercalcemia. What are the clinical features? First, directly coming, what is that? Most patients with primary hyperparathyroidism present with hypercalcemia, and serum calcium increases. Okay, and coming to the age and sex, usually it is 3 times more prevalent in women than in men. Okay, so mostly at the, what is that, menopausal time, premenopausal. So even hormone replacement therapy is also being used in treating this. Then incidence with the age, nothing as such, but most commonly seen in post-menopausal woman. Onset, usually it is gradual. It is not rarely sudden. It is. Okay, gradual onset, increased bone pains, swelling in the bones, bone aches, and fractures. Sudden means asymptomatic. If the patient is asymptomatic, so suddenly the person has a fracture with a little force, and they go to find the cause of the fracture, and it is not healing very fast. Then you come to know that it is parathyroid dependent hypercalcemia. Then hypercalcemic features are muscle weakness, fatigue, constipation, loss of weight, anorexia, nausea. Okay. Then irritable eyes, drowsiness, and confusion. Okay. Conjunctival flares. This is one of the important. Conjunctival flares and irritable eyes. So the patient, most of the time, the patient represents with this, and they end up in visiting the ophthalmologist. They go to the other department, and it is the duty of the ophthalmologist to keep in mind that it may be a parathyroid dependent hypercalcemia. Okay. Coming to the renal manifestations, polyuria, also there is a change in color, or I have already told, and what is that? Change in frequency and the type of pain that you are going to experience depending upon where the stone is. Okay, fine. Next, skeletal involvements is due to generalized increase in the osteoblastic bone reabsorption and increased osteoblastic activity. Okay, that may lead to brittle bones and may lead into fractures. Okay, what are the radiological features that you see in hyperparathyroidism? Okay, what do you see usually with what is that? Sub-periosteal reabsorption, mostly evident in the phalanges of the hand. You have they are eroded. Okay, then bone casts are seen. Then they are very tender, and metacarpal ribs and pelvics can be expanded, broadly expanded, and overlying cortex may be seen. Then what is that? Pathological fractures are seen. Then salt and pepper appearance over the skull is very important clinical features here. And dental, I have already told, there is erosion of the enamel. Then metastatic calcification here, the patient may end up in deposition of the calcifications, or what is the deposition of the calcium in the pericardium, myocardium. Okay, and calcification. Then corneal calcification is also there. I've already told. Because of that, the person will have irritability of the eyes and conjunctival flares. Okay, the renal functions may range from stage, how severe it is, and may eventually end up with renal failure, that is acute to chronic renal failure. Then endocrinic neoplasm, here it is mainly due to the abdominal cells. Definitely that will be found out in the biochemistry when you take a cross section of the slides. Okay, hyperplasia, or it is benign or malignant, whatever it is. Then what are the unusual presentations here is, rarely you may end up with pancreatitis, because of the formation of the calcium phosphate crystals, and they may go and get deposited on the pancreas, and they may block the pancreatic duct and may end up with acute pancreatitis. And you may also end up with psychosis because mental abnormality is more common. Coming to the parathyroid crisis, the crisis, when do you call it as a crisis, is when severe hypercalcemia, the calcium levels is severely high. It is more than 12 mg per dilution in the bloodstream. So what are the clinical features? Here the clinical features are mainly fatigue, weakness, lethargy, confusion, anorexia, nausea, abdominal pain, and constipation. Also polyuria, nocturia. Nocturia is very important here. And here bradycardia, heart blocks, and in ECG you have QT, what is that, interval is increased. What are the therapy you will have to do? It definitely it is dehydration, furosemide, calcitonin, and dialysis every 3 to 5 days if the person end up with chronic renal failure. Okay, these are the management. Okay, this completes the in short the introduction and what is that, disorders of the parathyroid gland only. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for the wonderful lecture. I think there are no questions. There are no questions. Any questions?
Okay.
One question.
There's a question. Yes. Okay. As I've already told you, that long-term use of steroids, anti-lactic drugs can lead to the hypoparathyroidism. How here what happens? The use, these are all the neurotransmitters. Okay. What happens exactly, the pathway, it will be very difficult to tell. What happens, they are directly streamed into the bloodstream, and in term, what is that, they may in long term use, it is not just you are using anti-lactic drugs and you end up with hypoparathyroidism. It is a long-term use of that, and it is not that in all the patients you end up with the hypoparathyroidism. Only few cases may report with that. The exact how they tell that it is one of the cause, but how exactly we'll have to go through the what is that chemical compositions of that and how the pathway. So actually I have not gone through that, but definitely it is. I'll try to rectify it. Okay.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Now I call upon Srinivas Reddy, fourth year student, for vote of thanks. Srinivas Reddy.
Good afternoon to everyone. Myself, Srinivas Reddy. It's my pleasure to deliver vote of thanks to all wonderful souls who made this today's meeting so successful. Now, I would like to thank our chief guest and our beloved lecturer of AME, Dr. Manjula ma'am, for sharing her knowledge with us and also for a valuable time for us. Thank you, ma'am. It means a lot, and we made this session a grand success. Now, I would like to thank our principal, Dr. Prashant sir, Chairman, Dr. Naragal sir, and Dr. J.R. Joshi sir for their support in making this session and also for the opportunity. Thank you, sir. Organizing team is heart and soul of this session. I thank them personally for their effort, and also I thank all the staff members of Department of Science. Last but not the least, I thank all the participants, students for their patience and valuable time for us in making today's session so successful. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, Srinivas. Note, tomorrow's guest speaker is Dr. Mithun Bondre, and the topic is General Introduction and Principles of Management of Indriya Pradoshaja Vikaras. Okay, thank you everyone. The session is ended. You can leave now.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.